In this lecture, we are going to be covering the sculptures and the works that were part of the walking tour. So this was if you were unable to make it to class on the day we did the walking tour, or if weather permitting we had to cancel it. So what I want you to pay attention to, these are all different artworks that are located on the University of Louisville's campus. And just as we've been discussing, right, public art is a reflection of how we see the world and a reflection of how a specific community looks at the world around it. So as we look at these, I want you to think about, what is each work of art saying? Why is it specifically there? We will be talking about a couple works that unfortunately I do not have images for, but we'll talk about them a little bit, and hopefully when you're on campus you can look at these objects yourself. All right, the first what we're going to look at is this is created by Dave Caudill, and it's titled Symphony of Notes, otherwise known as Effervescence. It was created in April 1999, and it is made out of stainless steel. Now, its location is very important. This is actually located on the exterior of the School of Music. This is, we could actually argue this is both a full round or a relief sculpture, and it was created through the method of execution of construction. Now, this was commissioned as part of a $1 million donation to the school by Margaret Comstock. And what happened was Dave Caudill, the artist, said the building itself was beautiful, but there was nothing there to denote it was the School of Music. And that was the inspiration behind this work, is that people could look at this building and instantly know it was the School of Music. So if you look closely, you might need to zoom in. This work is actually constructed. It's made up of 400 individual musical notes. Overall, the entire work weighs about 1,000 pounds. And what's interesting with this is the concept belonged to the artist, but the construction was fully completed with help from both his assistants and students. And when you look at this, right, not only is it made up of musical notes, but if you look at the sculpture itself, right, it's supposed to remind you of a conductor standing in front of an orchestra with his or her arms outstretched conducting the music. This is, interestingly enough, it's become a symbol of the school. All right, next we're going to move on to Big Red. This was created by Tom Lear, and it was installed December 20th and 21st, 1989. It was dedicated on June 26, 1990. It is made of metal, welded and painted red, and location is right in front of the School of Business. What's interesting is this image I have of it is actually an older image. If you go look at Big Red now, they have changed the area that it's in, and in fact they have created a retaining wall around it, and there's little benches. And the idea is that you would go and actually sit and be able to contemplate the work itself. What's interesting though is it's in the middle of a roundabout, so there's constantly cars driving through. This did cost $100,000, and it was funded by a private donor in the Business School Alumni Association. It is 26 feet high and weighs 3,000 pounds. Now, the idea behind this sculpture was that it would convey the energy and excitement between the business community and the business school. It's supposed to be extraordinary, fun, exciting, and magnificent. The idea in it is that people see what they want to see, and they see something new every time. And part of this idea is that it's supposed to reflect the ever-changing role of business, right? That the business world is always changing, and to be successful, we usually have to look at things differently. The title comes Big Red because this abstract work, you are actually supposed to be able to find a cardinal's head within it. I'll be honest, I never have. I think it always looks like an angry kangaroo with a javelin. All right, next, moving on. This is if you actually walked past Big Red and went through that passway through the School of Business. If you look onto your right, this is called Skydance. This was again created by Dave Caudill, the same artist that created Effervescence, Symphony of Notes, and then we will see another work of his later. This one was dated 2012. It is stainless steel, and with this one, right, there is a plaque right in front of it. And it reads, bright, smart, wise, funny, witty, caring, thoughtful, conscientious, generous of spirit, immensely talented. Many people are some of those things. Tom Peterson was all of them. He was the marketing communication executive in residence for the College of Business for 2 brief 6 years. He was 59 when he died suddenly. Anyone who met him always laughed in his presence and never forgot him. Dedicated fall 2012. And so you see this work of art is actually a memorial, and it is a memorial for Tom Peterson, who worked for the College of Business, and as it stated, he died suddenly. The idea with this work is it's supposed to be, right, this kind of the spirit as you follow the line of the sculpture. It's kind of the spirit going up and into the heavens. So this work specifically is a memorial. All right, next is what's called Freedom's Muse. This is on the exterior on your way to Ekstrom Library. This was created by Richard Hallier, and it dates 1998, and its material is bronze. And again, this is located in that quad right by the main library. This was donated in 1999 by Julia Lewis. She was the Assistant Director of Arts and Science Advising, and she actually purchased it at the St. James Art Fair, which is one of the country's largest art fairs. It occurs the first weekend in October in the old Louisville neighborhood. And what she did when she dedicated this, she just thought it was so inspiring and just so, this idea of freedom. What's interesting with this, jokingly around, my colleagues and I call this the hood ornament. And what you'll often see with her is she's often decorated, and this lecture is being recorded in the time of the pandemic, and so she is currently wearing a mask. Now, another work that we're going to talk about that I do not have an image of because it has actually been removed is as you walk out towards where you cross the streets in front of the Speed School, right there used to be actually a Confederate monument. The Confederate monument was moved there, and there was this controversy about whether or not there was a place for this Confederate monument on UofL's campus. Technically, it was not on the UofL campus because that little corner island thing was in the middle of the street. That's actually owned by the city of Louisville, not UofL. However, the conversation remained, like, should this monument to the Confederate dead, it was paid for by the Daughters of the Confederacy, was this an appropriate place for it? Because it was a place where students were walking by every day. And so the decision was made that no, this is not an appropriate place for it, because when we still have these monuments and memorials to the Confederacy, right, it's sending a specific message to the public, especially African Americans, right? That when it looks like we are celebrating the Confederacy, it looks like we are celebrating slavery. And that has been one of the major controversies lately with this removal of Confederate monuments and memorials. What's interesting, though, is many of these Confederate monument memorials, the objection is you're erasing history. Well, many of these were not created right after the Civil War. In fact, many of them were not created until much later, and often they were put up literally as tools of oppression. It is removed. It is not destroyed. It has actually been moved, and I'm not remembering the town, but it has been moved to a sculptural part in another part of Kentucky. But what's interesting is right next to it, on that other, as the triangle kind of widens up, you've got, what is it right there, second and third. There's the playhouse in the middle, but you have what's called a counter memorial or a counter monument. And what this is called Freedom Park. Freedom Park highlights Kentucky's role in the fight for civil rights. The total cost of the project was $2 million, and it was dedicated in 2003. And the absolute entire point of this was to challenge the Confederate monument that used to be there. So as you walk around Freedom Park, you're going to see different black obelisks that have timelines on them, and they talk about the road to civil rights as it occurred in Louisville. And then you're going to see there's large panels, and these panels each individually celebrate individuals from Louisville or who were in Louisville who had a prominent role in the fight for civil rights and equality. All right, moving on. This one is called Red Reeds. This was created by Russell Volt. Its original date was 2005. It is made of high-fired stone clayware, and it used to be in what's called Parish Court, which was this little outdoor courtyard. The problem with this one, though, is that it doesn't withstand cold weather well, and the tiles themselves kept cracking and breaking. So they were trying to figure out what to do with it. In fact, the image I have here is where it was still in Parish Court. And for a couple years, when it started getting cold, they actually would build this big plywood box, and literally it would be sitting in this giant plywood box just out in the middle of the court. Finally, they decided that was pretty much of an eyesore. And this now has been moved. It's actually on the front side of Ekstrom Library, so where the Starbucks is. And the reason it was moved there is because it's right next to the building, so it's a little warmer, and it's underneath the overhang, so it's protected from the elements more there. All right, next we have our third work by Dave Caudill. This is entitled The Balance of Dreams and Plans, and the date is 2012. The material is stainless steel, and it is 12 feet tall. Now, this one is located outside of Oppenheimer Hall, and this is important because this hall holds the Kent School of Social Work. And so this was actually donated by Caudill himself, and it was in honor of his wife, Joanne Harrison. It was in honor of her, not memory. She did not perish. This was dedicated into May 20th, 2010. And basically, it was given to the Kent School in honor of Caudill's wife. She was an alumni of the Kent School of Social Work, and she was a longtime social worker who retired in 2004. The sculpture was placed intentionally near the Kent School so students there could consider a life well spent in their future profession. A quote from the artist says, "Not just the form, but all the internal spaces, the sense of space. It's almost a tangible thing. It's lyricism. It's like music that doesn't have any words. It's a feeling. And observers just need to be open to feeling it." Harrison said, "In social work, it reflects the dreams and plans that must come together to provide the best outcome for our families." So the idea of this, right, if you go look at it in front of the School of Social Work, there's actually it's in the middle of a little rose garden, and there's a couple different benches that you can sit and contemplate. And the idea of this one, right, where we have the two different almost lines, and the idea of that is one is dreams and one is plans. And to be a successful social worker, you have to be able to balance both of those for your clients. You want to help them achieve their dreams, but you also need to be realistic and you need to make plans that are actually going to work. All right, next we move to the front of Grawemeyer Hall. This is probably the most famous sculpture that is on the U of L campus. This was created by Auguste Rodin, the original one, and this is titled The Thinker. This one itself was created in 1904, and it is a bronze, and I've already said it's there in front of Grawemeyer Hall. This is one of the best known statues in the world. In fact, when it was first created, Rodin, it was actually created as part of what's called the Gates of Hell. And these were two doors that were supposed to be on the doors of a museum. And the door itself depicted scenes from Dante's Divine Comedy. This figure, the Thinker, sat at the top of the gates and was in fact only 28 inches high when it was first created. And it's supposed to be Dante itself. And so the Thinker, right, the Thinker was created to show like Dante contemplating his own masterpiece. Well, how did we get this? Well, this was actually a gift to the city of Louisville in 1949. It was donated by a private donor, and what happened is the private donor required the executors of his will to buy a copy from France of the statue in its original, or not its original, in its colossal size. The original thinker of this size is actually in the Rodin Museum in France. Now, the gentleman who donated it requested that it be placed either in Central or Cherokee Park. However, the city's Committee on Monuments, headed by the mayor, decided it should be placed at the university instead because they thought it was much more effective, right? The thinker, somebody who's sitting there and contemplating. And they said, what better example, for that is at the university, where literally that's what the students, faculty and staff are supposed to be here doing, supposed to be thinking and contemplating. And so that's why it is at the University of Louisville. It was actually purchased from a gallery in Baltimore for $22,000, and it was being sold because another museum in Baltimore actually owned a copy of the statue. There are 20 other casts of this sculpture, because once the original was created, you had a mold, and so they reused it. So there are 20 other casts of the sculpture in the world, but this was actually the first one that was created after the original, and this was the only one that was made with the lost wax technique. All other casts use the sand mold method. All right, if you ever get the chance, we did not go inside Grawemeyer Hall, but if you ever get the chance, you should walk in. There are different sculptures there, including smaller copies of Michelangelo's David, Donatello's David. There's also a Foucault pendulum in there, so you should go check those out. But we skipped that in our tour. All right, next, we're going to Truth and Justice. This is located in that courtyard, kind of, behind Lutz, in front of Mitzi, and let's see, it's in that little triangle. The art building is right there, the fine arts building. It's kind of in that little courtyard here. And this is called Truth and Justice, and it was created by Barney Bright. What's interesting with this is this was created in 1973. It's also a bronze. And what happened is this piece was originally commissioned by the Downtown Development Corporation, and the sculpture originally stood in front of the Legal Arts Building on 7th Street. Our law school is actually home to 2 more Barney Bright bronzes, but they are not currently on public view. So again, this one originally commissioned for the Legal Arts Building downtown, but they were remodeling that building, so it needed to be moved. So it was moved to the University of Louisville. But what's interesting is then it was kind of forgot about, right? Once the remodel was done, it was never moved back. And then somebody started doing some research on it, and it was discovered it was owned by the Louisville Bar Association. However, the Louisville Bar Association didn't even know they owned it. So what happened is now it's on permanent loan to University of Louisville, but there's certain stipulations, right? They're not allowed to sell it or move it. It's interesting we talk about this placement, right? Because this is Truth and Justice. The male figure is Truth. If you look at him, his eyes are open. And the female figure represents Justice, and her eyes are closed, with the idea that justice is blind, that all should stand in front of the court of justice as equals. And so this sculpture has a very clear message of what lawyers are supposed to do. Yet I already said, it's in a courtyard, right, by Lutz, Miller, or Mitzi, and behind the art building. Wouldn't a better place for this be in front of the law school? Well, why isn't it there? Think about it. Where's the law school? The law school is on the main oval where the thinker is, and they did not want another statue there to actually compete with the thinker. All right, moving on. This is Rust Belt Baroque number 4. This is outside of Lutz, right outside the main doors. This was created by Sam Richards, and Sam Richards was actually the head of the University of Louisville's sculpture program, and unfortunately he died of a brain tumor at the age of 47. His works were mostly abstract, and he often liked to use found objects in his work. And so basically what he would do, these were just pieces of scrap metal he found laying around, and he would take them and manipulate them into these sculptural works. This was installed 1990, and it is steel and copper. And the piece was originally donated by the artist, but now it has actually also become a memorial to him. So unlike Skydance, right, where it was created as a memorial for the individual, what happens with Rust Belt Baroque number 4 is that it was not created as a memorial, right? But after he passed, it was put up and installed and became a memorial itself. All right, those were the works we went and looked at. However, I talked about a couple different ones. If you look outside of Schneider Hall, which is the Fine Arts Building, you're going to see the Navy Memorial there. On the front of the Fine Arts Building, there is a relief sculpture of Minerva. And then what you're looking here, these are going to be two sculptures that are actually across Eastern Parkway and over by the Speed School. The first, this one's called Integrity, and it was created by Jeffrey Atherton, 2009, and it's black granite, and it's 6 by 8 feet. What happens with this, interesting, is that it is a fabrication of the bent, which is the official symbol of the National Honor Society of Engineering, Tau Beta Pi. And a bent also is referred to in engineering. It's the load-bearing part of a bridge. So the idea of this is that it's meant to show the school's pride in having a chapter of this National Honor Society there, and it also shows the importance of having individual integrity as an engineer, right? You don't want to construct bridges or buildings that are going to be faulty. And then also by the Speed School, we have what's called red I-beams. The creator is an unknown artist. We don't even know the date. It's made of steel, and this is located by the Duthie Center for Engineering. And what happens with this, right, this is again using more of the found items, and so this is again celebrating engineering, literally looking at, right, the I-beams. Often I-beams are the core of much of our construction. All right, so that is mainly what we covered in the walking tour, but I want you to think about this, right, as we're talking about this section. What does public art do? And so for each one of these works, they all had a specific message, some specific meaning that was being held out to the public.